Hi everyone, it's Laura here, Heart of Ukraine Ministries in Ukraine and out at House of David, the Rehab Center. I thought I'd do a short video and explain a situation that we had, and just to give you kind of an idea of some of the things that we encounter here, especially with the rehabilitation clients. Very similar things in America, but some unique twists here in Ukraine because the culture is different. So anyway, we had gotten in a couple new clients, and one of the guys, Vladimir, and another guy, Alexander, they decided to leave one morning. And we had gotten up about 5 o'clock. We were going to go work in the fields because it's much cooler than trying to do it during the heat of the day. And we are scheduled to have a number of days that were really, really hot. So we got up at 5. We all kind of eat a muffin or something like that, and then we head out to the garden. And that day, our plan was to go to the back garden, a house that a lady lets us use because she just wants someone to work the garden. She doesn't live close anymore. And we were going to weed between the beans that we have there. And so we got up and did our normal routine, and about 5:20, our senior client, Sasha, came to me and said, both Alexander and Vadim want to leave. Alexander had been with us before, only a couple days, and then he left. The cravings get to him. So I kind of wasn't surprised that that was what was happening with him. So he changed his clothes very quickly. I gave him his little bag of personal information that he gave to us, and that included, I think, about 14 grivna. I mean, that's not even $1. $1 is like 26 to 29 grivna now. So I gave that to him, and he took off walking down the road. And a lot of times when one guy wants to leave, another guy who's been waiting or trying to get up the nerve to leave doesn't want to go by himself, he jumps on and he wants to leave with the first guy. So a lot of times we try and delay one guy so that the other guy gets down the road, because sometimes when two of them leave at the same time, they can cause problems. Mark was getting ready to head into the city to go pick up our van from the mechanic. So we didn't have our van. A lot of times we may give him a ride out of our village because we want to protect our village from situations like what I'm getting ready to share you. So Alexander takes off, and Vladimir goes in, and I'm checking his stuff. You know, we always inspect to make sure that they're not taking something of ours, and we've got a inventory sheet that we do when they first come in. So I'm kind of checking all that kind of stuff. And I let him go, and he's got, you know, like 12 grivna, papers with some phone numbers on it, those kind of things, nothing really, really big. And so by that time, Alexander's gone, Vadim starts to walk out of the village, and we carry on with our day. So we're kind of behind the schedule. I'm telling the guys to gather the tools, talking with Mark a little bit, because he's going to get on the 6:20 bus, and we'll be at the garden while he's gone. And not even 10 minutes later, Vladimir is back on our doorstep, ringing the doorbell, and he says he doesn't feel well. You know, he wants us to call an ambulance. Well, both Mark and I have been in this field for 30 years before we came to Ukraine, so it's like 45 years now that we have been kind of involved in a lot of rehab and those kind of things. And if I had to rate his detoxification between 1 and 10, I would say maybe a half. Maybe a 1 at the most. He complained that his stomach was bothering him. I gave him some Pepto-Bismol, said he threw up, but he was eating huge meals. And I didn't see any other indications that really he had an upset stomach. So, you know, some of these guys, they exaggerate their symptoms. You know, we have to really pay attention to a lot of different cues, but this guy definitely not seeing any symptoms whatsoever. You know, and one of the big points that we really have to work on with the clients is usually they have got families and friends who save them from the consequences of their choices. Now, there's a big difference between saving someone and helping someone. Saving someone is where you jump in and you take the consequences for their bad choices. Helping someone is saying, you've got a problem, you made some bad choices, I will stand beside you as you fix your problem. Big difference. So the saving other people, you know, comes into codependency. So here in rehab, we really try and help them experience the consequences of their choices, because that's how we learn as people. You know, our mom says, don't touch the hot stove, don't touch it, don't touch it. She's finally not looking. We put our hand up on the hot stove as a little child, we get burned. We're never going to do that again. It teaches us. And that's how we learn. God gives us consequences for our choices in order to teach us and to draw us near to Him. So we use that a lot in our situation. Of course, there's mercy and there's grace in there, but there's also tough love. So at this point, when someone has chosen to leave, one of the main things that we can do with them is to help them see the consequences of their choices. So with Vladimir, we said, you left, you are no longer our responsibility. Your consequences for your choices are your problem. Well, I don't feel good, and he went through the pleading, and we almost saw a tear, and we said, no, you chose to leave. If you don't feel well, you can go to the hospital. Well, call an ambulance for me. No, first of all, we're not going to burn our bridge with the ambulance in that kind of fashion. So we kind of go round and round with him, and he goes through the different stages of manipulation, and we say, no, you need to leave. So he says, well, I want to come back on the program. No, once you choose to leave, you have to stay away for 30 days, and then we'll consider taking you back, because we've learned really quickly it just can be a revolving door where they come in and out, come in and out. We expend all of our energy and our investment in bringing a guy in, all the laundry, all the intake processing, all that kind of stuff for him to turn around and leave in a day or 2 days. So we want people who really, really want to change their lives. So that's one of the tests. If you really want to change your life after 30 days, we'll take you back. So no, you burned your bridge, you have to leave, you can't come back to us. So we kind of went round and round with him. He finally leaves. I leave with the men to walk back to the back garden about 5:50. Now we're, 30 minutes plus being late for the work schedule. Mark leaves on the 6:20 bus to go into the city. Takes him 2 hours to get there, to get to the mechanic, and to pick up our van. So we stay in the backfield, and we work till about 8:15. We worked just a little bit longer that day because we wanted to finish the section. So we come back to the house. We usually eat at 8 o'clock. We get back here about 8:15. We sit down. We start reading the Proverbs for the day. The 22nd month of the day of the month, we read the 22nd chapter. So we start to read that, and all of a sudden we hear rop, 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 and it's a siren right outside of our house. And it was like, well, what is that? That sounds like an ambulance or a police car, and then we hear it again. And so I stand up and I walk out there, and there's an ambulance in our driveway, and I say, can I help you? And they said, well, we had a call that someone's sick here. And I said, well, who called you? And they looked on it and they said, Mark. And I'm like, well, first of all, Mark doesn't have the verbal skills in Ukrainian to call an ambulance. I don't know if I do. And we didn't call one. And so as I'm talking with them over the fence, out around the corner, here comes Vladimir. And so he starts walking up, and I said, this guy left our program. He chose to leave. He said he wasn't feeling good, but, his symptoms for detoxification are almost nil, and I don't really think he has any issues. So they talk to him. He sits down. They do an examination. I go back inside. We read our Proverbs. I start to teach them, and then the doorbell rings. And so I go back out there. Let's see, that was probably 8:20 is when they first showed up, and I called Mark to let him know, what was going on with the ambulance. And then probably about 8:50, so they were out there, for 20 minutes or so with him. They ring the doorbell, and I go back out there, and they said, well, he wants to come back on the program. And I said no, and I explained to him what our rule is, that he chose to leave. He can come back in 30 days. Well, he was crying, and he really wants to. And I said, he is manipulating you. You guys found that there's nothing wrong with him, yet he called you and wasted your time and your energy, and he can't come back. And I started to explain to him the process of being held accountable for your consequences, but I also explained to the 5 major types of manipulation, and I explained how he was trying to manipulate them. And they were very, very interested in all of this, and were asking a lot of questions. And through this, Vladimir realized that he couldn't shame us through them. Oh, look how bad these people are. I felt bad, and they didn't get me medical help. He realized that wasn't going to work with us. None of his manipulation tricks were going to work with us. So he starts walking down the road. So I finished my conversation with the ambulance guys. There's 3 of them, and they leave. And I go back inside, and, we eat breakfast and the whole bit. And that was probably um, about 9, just after 9, 9:10 o'clock. I'm looking at my notes here because I called Mark. One of the reasons is I wanted to update him what was going on, but it also gives us a time marker for some things that are going on so that later on I can sit down and write out what happened in the client's file. And it gives us just a timeline of how things go. So that was about just after 9. Mark and I finally make contact with each other. I tell him kind of what's going on, talking to him for a number of minutes. And then the doorbell rings again. And I go back out there, and it's one of our neighbors, Valia, and one of her neighbors in the little apartment complex around the corner, Valentine. And basically what happened is just before 8 o'clock, this guy saw a man step into her apartment, and he thought maybe it was a guest or something like that, and then saw him leave. And he eventually saw her out back working in the garden, and he says, well, I saw this guy stepping into your house. Do you have a guest? And she says, no, I don't have anybody. My young granddaughter is there asleep. So after a search, they realized that he had stolen the phone. And they mentioned that this guy was wandering around the apartment complex looking for the Drug and Alcohol Rehabilitation Center. And they told him it's just right around the corner. And I said, well, we've had no new clients come. And then we figured out, it's probably one of these guys that left. So I showed them both pictures, and they identified Vladimir as the guy who was there asking for questions, and that the one that went into her apartment. So I tell them, well, he went walking that way. They were on their bicycles. I said, you might be able to ride your bicycles and see him and see about getting your phone back. I said, I'm going to go in and call the police. Since we have a good relationship with the police, I went in and called my police contact, explained a little bit real quickly of what was going on, and he said, I will be there in 15 minutes, which is moving from the town to get here in 15 minutes. Usually it takes more like about 20. So I went back inside the house, and I typed up and translated into Ukrainian some of the points that I told him on the phone, and sent them to him on Viber. Viber is kind of like an internet texting service that we have here in Ukraine. And just to follow up with him, just to make sure he understood me, those kind of things. So I went and followed up with that, called Mark and told him, guess what, this guy stole a phone, and I bet that was probably the phone that he used to call the ambulance, because he did not have a phone in his possession when he was with us and when he left. I also sent that same information that I sent to the police to our translator, Natasha, who was, I think, visiting her parents. And I wanted her to know what was going on, so that if I had to call her, to use her to talk and translate on the phone, that she would know what was going on. So let's see. We start to take care of the daily chores. I'm in the barn feeding the pigs, and my phone rings through Viber, and it's the police out front saying that they're there. So I stop feeding the pigs, I go out there, and they wanted to talk to our clients. So I called our 3 other clients out there so that he could ask them some questions. What do you know about this guy? How was he acting? Those kind of things. And while we're out there talking, we realized that hanging off of our fence is the yellow and black T-shirt and black shirt under it that Vladimir had been wearing when he left. And so he had intentionally changed his appearance, because when he left, I saw a light colored T-shirt or some that I think he had, a black shirt, and then a yellow and black T-shirt over it, jeans with elastic around the ankles, and some tennis shoes. And so, sure enough, there was that shirt. He had tried to change his appearance so that he couldn't be recognized. Our guys shared some information with him. Basically, the guy, they call him not adequate in the mind, which means that he's probably a little bit socially challenged, special in some aspects. He just had a demeanor about him that was just a little bit different, But again, we only had barely over a day to spend some time with him. And we'd gotten in a couple new clients, one right after another, so we were kind of, sorting them all out. So I called Natasha because the police were asking a question. I just couldn't quite catch one or two of the words. She translated for me, and we talked a little bit more about which direction he had left when he was walking. And so the police left, and they're searching the village on this side of us and on this side of us. and then shortly after that, I was calling Mark to give him an update, and here comes our neighbor Valia and her neighbor Valentine, and I said, hey, stop, and I said, Mark, let me call you back. So I talked with them, and I said, did you see him? And they said no, but we did talk with the police, and she was very thankful. And the situation could have been a whole different. She could have been really upset that one of the guys who had left our facility had stolen from her, but she was just very appreciative that we responded so quickly that we were able to get the police here. Because, you guys know, a stolen phone is pretty low on the totem pole when it comes to things that police handle. So for me, I think it was also a testament of our relationship with the police and how we've cooperated with them and built that relationship, that they were willing, to come out. Probably maybe a little bit of a boring day as well, who knows. Anyway, they kind of explained. I got Valentine's phone number because obviously she doesn't have a phone anymore. And they left. I called Mark again, gave him the update that I had talked with Valia about the phone, that she was okay with the situation. She wasn't blaming us, which is really good because we really try and protect our reputation here in the village. And the village knows that we protect the village. A client risks our reputation here in the village, and boy, we're all over it in a heartbeat, This all ended about 10:46 in the morning. We finished our chores, and Mark comes home with the vehicle. We have lunch at 1 o'clock, and as we're sitting and eating lunch, about 1:10, our doorbell rings. And we go out, and it's the police contact that we have. And he said they found him. So apparently he had kind of started walking out of the village, circled back around the cooperative program, and he was back in there. And they were driving around looking, and they saw him, and when he saw them, he took off running. So they had to chase him down, throw him to the ground, handcuff him, the whole bit. So our police contact was sweating, and I was like, you ran after him? He's like, yeah, I had to run after him, and he's a captain, so he's, probably early 40s, I think, not used to running after subjects too much anymore. And actually, he has some broken fingers on one of his hands where they got into a fight with a drunk guy probably a week or so ago. So he's got this hand, and he still ran after him, chased him down, and jumped on him, So anyway, he wanted copies of the guy's documents. So I went inside and got that out of his file, and I actually had to print it off of what I had scanned because I couldn't find his file anywhere. It's kind of like a couple pieces of paper and a document protector. And I went back out and I said, well, here's the best that I have right now. It's just a copy. It's not original. I had to kind of Photoshop it a little bit to get the parts together because it was a couple pictures that I had taken. And he left, and just as he left, I turned around, and sure enough, on the ground between our two lawn chairs on the front patio was the document. And it's like, how did that even get out here? So my guess is that maybe he had tried to pick it up. I remember seeing him that morning standing in the front veranda area and just thinking it was really weird, and so I went out there to kind of check on him, and he acted suspicious. So he may have picked it up off the table or off, I have like a little inbox right outside our door. He may have picked it up from there. Like I said, we got a couple guys all at once, and it was a little bit confusing, and I may have left it sitting out there. But when he saw me coming out there, he dropped it back behind the chairs. So I said, hey, I called back to the police, and I said, here's his stuff. And he says, well, this is enough for me right now. Just send it to me on Viber. And so I went into the house and scanned all the pages really quick and sent it to Viber. And they took him into the police station and booked him for theft. Later that evening, I got a call from Valia, and they had found the phone on his persons, and they were going to release it back to her. So her friend, Valentine, I gave him a ride to the police department when I went to take the meal to them. And so he was able to get the phone back and take it back to Valentine, just very, very happy about the whole thing. It was kind of interesting when we pulled up in front of the police department. They have a gate that opens and closes, and it was kind of open, and another police car had just come out. And so I pulled right in, and I could hear him in the back seat, like, you shouldn't be doing that. But of course, when I pulled in, the officers are waving at me because we're there every day, you know. And so pulled right up, and you know, the desk sergeants come out and get the food and help me transport it, and we chit chat about different things, you know. So anyway, he was able to get the phone back, give it back to her. She's just ecstatic, you know, about the whole situation. I thought about contacting our mayor and letting her know about the situation, but this is one of her best friends, so I knew that her best friend had probably already given her a whole update on it. Between lunch and us taking dinner to the police, I sat down and created my little chronologue. Police officer, you know, I'm going to document all that kind of stuff. Got it translated, had my translator check it, and she corrected a few things, and then I also sent it on Viber to our police contact so that he would kind of have that chronological of when things happened. So what we assume is when he left us, he wandered around the village, you know, probably looking for something to steal. He had, you know, only just a couple grivna. To get out of our village is like 30 grivna now, and he had probably 12 grivna. And so somewhere probably a little bit before 8 o'clock is when he stole the phone and he called the ambulance. And they got here about 8:20. And that's when this guy, Valentine, saw our ex-client go into Valia's apartment. And then he didn't know where she was at, if she was feeding the animals or in the garden. And he finally found her and talked with her. So it was about an hour later is when they came by our center. So we have all sorts of stuff like that, interesting stories. You know, we probably ought to write down some of the funny things that happen, the interesting things, the heartbreaking things, you know, just maybe someday to write a book about working in rehab. But we don't talk a lot about these things on our Facebook page or our other social media. One is we don't want our clients to feel like they're in a fishbowl, you know, and that we're sharing all their secrets. You know, we explain to them we're going to take pictures, we're going to show that you're feeding the animals or you're working in the kitchen or these kind of things. But we try and protect, you know, that sensitive information, and only through publicly known information, like they came to us through the feeding program or, you know, some of that kind of stuff that we are comfortable with and we know the client would be comfortable with us talking about, we share on our social media. And of course we have lots of family and friends who are checking out our Facebook page, which is one reason I'm doing a video, because there's not going to be a translation for the video. And only those who speak English are going to be able to understand this and follow what I'm saying. But just to kind of give you an idea of some of the things that we encounter. You know, Mark and I, our whole lives, we can look back on and see how God prepared us for this ministry and the different things, even as children, going through high school, our previous marriages, you know, my first husband being an alcoholic, his first wife, you know, being a drug addict when he was a drug addict, those kind of things. But just how God prepared us for this ministry, how he brought us together for this ministry, and how he uses us here. And it's probably at least once a week, Mark and I will talk about how, oh, we had this situation and it's amazing, you know, in our history that this happened and it prepared us for this. So God doesn't waste a tear. He doesn't waste any kind of pain, nothing. Everything that goes on in our life is building us up for that purpose that he has for us. And of course, as we move through life, sometimes that purpose changes a little bit, like you might be a mother, and that's your main purpose. But when your children are grown, you know, it could be being a grandmother, or it could be, you know, working in a ministry at the church, or there's all sorts of different ministries that God calls us to. Some of them are very visible, like being a missionary. We're kind of like the nose of Christ. You can't talk to somebody without looking at their nose. But the nose is worthless without the heart and the lungs, you know. And so a lot of those people who support us, how you support us, just hitting the like button on our page lets us know that we're not alone. You know, the comments that you guys leave, the prayers that you leave. You know, I just got in a box from America some of the things that we were working on to give to the police, and someone had slipped in some dish towels that they made and a note. It just brought me to tears, that they would think about me, especially in a men's rehab center. The only other girls I've got are my dog and some of my pigs that I go talk to. But just to think about some of the things that we need, the emotions that we go through. All of that is just so encouraging to us because we're, on the front line spiritually in some of the things that we're dealing with. But again, we're no different than a mother who's raising up her children, people who serve by cleaning the church. Each one of us, God has prepared us for something specifically, whether it's in the church doing a ministry or out of the church or in our personal lives or witnessing to people where we work through our deeds and then eventually through our words. All of that is extremely important, and I would challenge you that if you haven't thought about that in your own life, think about what you have been through, how God has prepared you and what He's calling you to do. And God always gives us something bigger than we can handle. A lot of people say, God never gives you more than you can handle. That is a lie. Because God always gives us something more than we can handle because He wants to be there to give us our strength, for Him to get the glory, not to us to get the glory, the pat on the back. I'm not saying it's wrong to be appreciated for what you're doing. We love being, when somebody tells us thank you, for something that we've done, but our goal needs to be doing it for God's glory, and He gets the glory when we have a situation we can't handle and we know it's Him. It grows our faith, and the people around us see this. So it's very, very important. But think about, what is God calling you to do? It may seem huge and momentous. I mean, us being called, we were already grandparents by the time we moved to Ukraine. And we're learning another language, first Russian, and then we ended up starting to learn Ukrainian. God can use anybody, and He prepares you for it. And sometimes it's scary, but we have to rely upon Him. So, my little preaching there at the end. But just wanted to share with you today, and I hope you enjoyed the story, and some of the drama that we have here. And I hope that I encouraged you, and just thank you for all your encouragement and prayers, and hitting the like button or the love button or the laughing button for us. Good night, guys.